My name is Isabelle. I'm 25 years old. I work for my parents' small microchip manufacturing company. Not the kind that makes headlines, but the kind that quietly keeps big names running. My parents started it when I was little, and I grew up watching them turn long nights into something solid. After graduating, I joined as an intern, determined to learn the business from the inside out. Most of my friends thought it was beneath me, that I should have gone to some glossy Silicon Valley firm. But I wanted something real, something built with family sweat, not investor smiles. It was at one of those post-college reunion parties that I met Brandon. Everyone was there to brag new jobs, new cars, new lives. I almost didn't go, but my friend Leah convinced me, saying, "You can't just marry your job, Izzy." I cut her off. I hate nicknames. So I went. The bar glowed gold under soft lights, laughter spilling over cheap cocktails. Brandon was standing by the counter, laughing with a group of guys I didn't recognize. When our eyes met, something flickered confidence, maybe charm. He walked over with that easy stride of someone who's used to getting attention. "You're Isabelle, right?" We had economics together. His voice was warm, deep practiced. We started talking. He asked about my work, my parents' company, the projects I was managing. He listened, or at least pretended to, and it felt good to be seen. Most men I'd met that year only talked about crypto or their gym routines. Brandon was different. He seemed genuinely interested in my world. By the end of the night, he asked for my number. Our first date was 2 nights later. He brought roses opening doors and complimented me without sounding rehearsed. He remembered my favorite coffee order, oat milk latte, no sugar, from a throwaway comment. It was sweet, disarming. Weeks turned into months. He texted every morning, called every night. He'd surprise me with coffee outside the office, send voice notes when I worked late. His gestures were thoughtful, almost too perfect, like he'd read a manual on how to be the ideal boyfriend. I didn't care. I was happy. When I introduced him to my parents, my mother was polite, almost excited. But my father looked at him the way a man looks at an unfamiliar piece of machinery, cautious, curious, searching for the flaw. After dinner that night, Dad sat me down in the living room. The overhead light buzzed softly. "I don't trust him," he said. I laughed. "You don't trust anyone I date." "This one's different," he said quietly. "There's something off about his smile. He watches people too closely, like he's calculating." I rolled my eyes. "You've been watching too many thrillers, Dad. He's kind. He treats me well." Dad sighed and said nothing more. But as I went upstairs that night, I felt the weight of his gaze follow me, not judging, just worried. 6 months later, Brandon proposed. It happened at an expensive restaurant overlooking the bay, the kind with floor-to-ceiling glass and violin music drifting between tables. I thought it was just another dinner. Until dessert came, a small plate with a covered silver dome. When the waiter lifted it, a ring glimmered against a bed of rose petals. Brandon got down on one knee. "Isabelle," he said softly, "I've never met anyone who makes me want to build a life from the ground up. Will you marry me?" The world tilted. People clapped. I said yes, because that's what love is supposed to look like, right? Applause, champagne, trembling hands. I didn't even realize I was crying until he slipped the ring on my finger. Later, my father hugged me silent. My mother cried, overjoyed. But I caught the look on Dad's face. Relief wasn't part of it. There was concern there, buried under forced smiles. That night, when Brandon dropped me home, he leaned close and whispered, "Your dad doesn't like me." I hesitated. "He's just protective." Brandon smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Then he'll come around once I'm family." I should have paid attention to how he said that, not when, but once. Like my life was already part of a plan he'd drawn up in advance. The next morning, Mom told me she and Dad wanted to gift us something special for the wedding. A house, she said, in San Diego. It's close to your work near the coast. Your father and I agreed it's time you start your own home. I couldn't believe it. A house. A real house. Brandon's excitement seemed genuine. "This is incredible, Belle." He caught my expression and quickly corrected himself. "Isabelle, sorry." I brushed it off. Maybe it was just habit. When we visited the place, sunlight spilled through the windows, touching every corner like a blessing. I could already see our future there, the breakfast table, the garden, the laughter. Brandon wrapped his arm around me and said, "You'll make this place beautiful." But as I looked at his reflection in the glass, something in his smile made me shiver. It wasn't love, it was possession. Still, I ignored it. I told myself love makes people protective. That was my first mistake, confusing control for care. That evening, as I unpacked boxes in the new house, I got a message from my father. It was short. Never forget the person who wants to share your home must also share your respect. I smiled and texted back a heart, but I didn't realize it was a warning disguised as affection. Because soon that house, my gift, my dream, would become the stage where every lie, every hidden motive, and every mask would finally fall. Moving into the new house felt like a dream come true. Every corner smelled of fresh paint and possibility. I spent weeks picking out curtains, testing lighting, comparing fabrics, trying to make everything feel like mine. The master bedroom was my masterpiece, soft cream tones, linen sheets, a hint of lavender in the air. It was the room where I imagined we'd build our future. At first, Brandon was supportive. He praised my choices, carried boxes, hung shelves. But little things started to shift. Subtle, almost invisible. One morning, as I brewed coffee before work, he leaned against the counter and said casually, "You know, once we're married, you don't have to keep working so hard. My mom always said a woman's true value is in her home." I froze spoon midair. What's that supposed to mean? He smiled. Just saying you deserve to rest. You don't need to stress yourself with numbers and suppliers. Focus on us. I like my job, Brandon. It's not about stress. It's about purpose. He shrugged, brushing it off. You'll see. Once we start a family, you'll change your mind. I laughed nervously. You're making it sound like I'll wake up one day and forget who I am. He grinned, kissed my forehead, and left for work. I told myself it was just an old-fashioned opinion. Everyone's entitled to one right. But the comments continued. Always soft, never loud enough to fight over. Always wrapped in care. By the third time, it wasn't a suggestion anymore. Weeks passed. Between work and wedding planning, I barely had time to sleep. One night, I came home later than usual. The house was lit, shadows moving inside. I smiled. Maybe Brandon had invited friends. That would have been nice, a small distraction from the chaos. When I opened the door, the smell of cooked food hit me first. Then voices, laughter. In the living room, 5 people sat on my couch. Brandon, his parents, his sister, her husband, and their little girl. Suitcases stacked by the wall. For a moment, I just stood there, unable to process the scene. "Oh," I said slowly, "I didn't realize we were having guests." Brandon's sister looked at me with a smirk. "Guests? No, honey. We're family. We're moving in." My heartbeat stuttered. "You're what?" His mother rose from the couch like a queen ascending a throne. Her eyes swept over me, sharp and disdainful. "Are you deaf, child? Since you're marrying our Brandon, you'll live with us and take care of us. That's how family works. A good wife joins her husband's home, not the other way around." I blinked. My throat tightened. "This is my house. My parents gave it to me." Her lips curled. "That's even better. A house from the bride's side. We'll have plenty of space." I turned to Brandon, silently begging for him to step in to defend me, to say something. But he just sat there nodding, calm, comfortable. My stomach turned. His mother continued, pointing toward the stairs. "My husband and I will take the master bedroom. My daughter and her family can have the east wing. You and Brandon will take the small room near the kitchen, the helper's room." The room spun. She was talking about my sanctuary, the one I'd painted, furnished, built. I wanted to laugh, but my voice came out like glass. "You expect me to sleep in the guest room, to give you my bedroom in my house?" Brandon's father spoke, then voice low and menacing. "You'll learn respect. It's a wife's duty to care for her elders." I stared at Brandon again. "Say something." He looked down at the floor, muttering, "Mom just wants what's best for the family." Something inside me cracked, quietly without warning. I reached into my pocket, unlocked my phone, and called my father. I didn't speak. I just pressed speaker and left the call running. Also, his mother added, "You'll quit that silly job of yours. From now on, you'll focus on cooking, cleaning, and keeping the house in order. Brandon must concentrate on his career. You're lucky we're even allowing you to stay." My pulse thundered in my ears. "Allowing me," I repeated. Her eyes narrowed. "Don't take that tone with me." The front door slammed open. My father stood there, chest heaving, his face red with rage. He must have driven straight from work. "You threatening my daughter," he roared. Brandon's father tried to stand, but my dad's fist landed first. The man stumbled back, crashing into the couch. Brandon jumped up, yelling, "Mr. Walker, please." "Don't you dare call me that," my father shouted. "You bring your whole clan into my daughter's house to humiliate her." My mother rushed in behind him, pulling me into her arms. I could feel her shaking, but her voice was steady. "Get out," she said. "All of you, right now." "This is Brandon's house, too," his mother shrieked. "No, it's not," my mother replied coldly. "This house was a wedding gift to Isabelle. You and your son have no claim here." The shouting escalated, Brandon's sister crying, her husband swearing under his breath, his mother cursing. But my father stood like a storm, unmovable. "If you don't leave, I'll call the police." It took 10 minutes for them to finally storm out, dragging their suitcases. Brandon followed, but not before throwing me one last wounded look like I was the one who ruined everything. When the door finally slammed shut, I crumbled into my mother's arms. The adrenaline left, replaced by shaking sobs. My father put a hand on my shoulder. "It's good this happened now," he said quietly, before it was too late. I nodded, unable to speak. He was right, but the words still burned. That night, I lay awake in the master bedroom, my bedroom staring at the ceiling fan, spinning slow circles above me. The bed that once felt like a dream now felt like a battlefield. I kept replaying the evening, the suitcases, the smug faces, the silence from the man who claimed to love me. By morning, one thing was clear. The wedding was off, and I was done being polite. The next morning, I woke to a silence that felt heavier than shouting. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the engagement ring still glinting faintly on my finger. It looked meaningless now, just a circle of metal, cold and hollow. My parents were downstairs. Mom was already on the phone canceling the florist, the caterer, the photographer. Dad was pacing by the window, muttering, "I should have trusted my gut." I walked in, took off the ring, and placed it on the table between them. "It's over," I said simply. No one argued. Mom exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. Dad nodded once. Relief and anger tangled together in his eyes. "Good," he said. "Now change the locks. Today." And I did. I called a locksmith before breakfast. By noon, every key Brandon had was worthless. I packed his belongings into boxes, shirts, books, cables, cologne, each item a reminder of how easily someone can disguise manipulation as affection. When the last box was sealed, I sat on the floor and cried. Not because I missed him, but because I finally saw him clearly, and it hurt to admit that I had chosen blindness. 2 days later, a letter arrived, a thick envelope with his handwriting. For a split second, I thought maybe it was an apology. Maybe remorse had finally reached him. I opened it. Inside was a typed, itemized list. Expenses during relationship with Isabelle Walker. My name printed like a line item in an accounting report. Under it, coffee flowers, dinners, gas money, movie tickets, anniversary gifts. Total $142.28. And below that in red ink, "If you do not repay within 7 days, I will come to your workplace and make sure everyone knows what kind of woman you really are." My hands shook, then steadied. I laughed not from amusement, but disbelief. A laugh that sounded more like a crack splitting open. He had been keeping score. Every smile, every dinner, every "I love you" had a price tag attached. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it beside my coffee mug. Then I took a long sip and whispered, "Game on." The next morning I was in a meeting when my assistant rushed in pale. "Isabelle, there's something you need to see." When I stepped into the lobby, I froze. There they were, Brandon, his mother, and his father, standing by reception with a massive poster board. On it, written in black marker, were all the expenses from the letter, enlarged for everyone to see. "Isabelle Walker used our son," his mother declared to the stunned crowd. "She bled him dry, then threw him away like garbage." My coworkers whispered. Phones lifted. People were filming. For one horrifying second, my body locked up. Then something inside me, the part my father built, the part my mother protected, woke up. I walked straight toward them. "You want your money?" I said evenly. "Fine." I pulled out my checkbook, wrote a check for $3,200, and handed it to Brandon. "There, a little extra for your trouble." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Brandon blinked, confused. "That's right," I said louder. "You keep receipts, so do I." I opened now in my phone, showing him digital invoices. MacBook for your birthday, $2,000. Watch for your father, $600. Necklace for your mother, $300. Toys for your niece, $90. Looks like you're the one in debt. Brandon's face drained of color. His mother sputtered, "That's not—" I cut her off. "No, please, keep talking. Everyone's recording." The lobby had gone silent, except for the hum of phones. Brandon fumbled for his wallet, trembling as he counted cash, his face red and blotched. He handed it to me, without a word. I took it, smiled faintly, and said, "Transaction complete." Then I turned to my assistant. "Call security. Have them escorted out." As the guards approached, Brandon's mother hissed something under her breath about ungrateful women. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The humiliation in their eyes was enough. When they were finally gone, my colleagues broke into quiet applause. Sarah from accounting walked up, shook her head, and whispered, "You dodged a psychopath." I smiled weakly. "Yeah," I said. "Feels like I just returned a bad investment." That evening, my dad came home with takeout and a proud smirk. "Heard about the little show today," he said, unpacking the bags. "You handled it like a pro." I laughed softly. "Guess I learned from the best." He looked serious then. "You okay, kid?" I nodded. "I am, just tired." He studied me for a moment, then said something I'd never forget. "Love isn't supposed to make you prove your worth, Isabelle. The right man will never keep receipts." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe there were still right men in the world. That night, I placed the envelope, the letter, and the returned cash into a box and sealed it shut. A time capsule of everything I refused to carry forward. But Brandon wasn't done. 2 days later, my phone started buzzing. Messages, emails, new accounts tagging me in posts, calling me a gold digger. Anonymous comments under my company's page. The war had gone digital, and this time he wasn't just trying to humiliate me, he wanted to break me. At first, I thought ignoring him would make it stop. If I didn't respond, if I pretended not to see his messages, maybe he'd lose interest and move on. But silence, I learned, only made him louder. It started with emails, paragraphs of apologies that swung wildly between remorse and rage. "I miss you. You ruined everything. We belong together. You'll regret this when I'm gone." Each one arrived at dawn like he wanted to invade the quietest hours of my day. Then came the social media posts, blurry photos of us, with captions twisted into lies. He wrote that I'd used him, cheated on him, stolen from his family. People I barely knew started asking questions, their curiosity disguised as concern. By the third week, it wasn't just online. I saw his car outside my office once, parked across the street, windows tinted. The next day, he was at the grocery store near my house, pretending to browse the produce section. Once I caught him watching me at the gym through the glass wall, just standing there with a smile that wasn't a smile. I started checking locks twice, then 3 times. I stopped going for evening runs. My phone became something I hated touching because every vibration made my chest tighten. Dad noticed first. He came by one night unannounced and found me sitting in the dark lights-off phone clutched in my hand. "Isabelle," he said softly. "This isn't living." "I can handle it," I murmured. He crouched beside me. "No, you've handled enough." The next morning, he drove me to a lawyer. Her name was Carmen Diaz, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who'd seen cases like mine too many times. I handed her the folder. I'd been quietly collecting screenshots, printed emails, photos of his car outside my work. She flipped through it, her brow furrowing deeper with each page. "This isn't just harassment," she said finally. "It's stalking. You need a restraining order, immediately." The word stalking felt like swallowing glass, but hearing it said out loud made it real, and somehow that gave me strength. 2 weeks later, we were in court. Brandon sat across from me in a gray suit that hung a little too loose on his shoulders. He tried to meet my eyes, but I didn't flinch. The judge listened, reviewed the evidence, and when it was over, said the words that finally let me breathe again. "Mr. Hayes, you are to maintain a distance of no less than 500 feet from Miss Walker at all times." His mother gasped. His father muttered something, but I didn't hear them. My heart was pounding too hard. As I walked out of the courtroom, Carmen patted my arm. "He'll test it once or twice," she said. "They always do, but keep documenting everything. You're safe now." Safe. I hadn't realized how foreign that word had become. The weeks after that were quiet, almost too quiet. No calls, no emails, no sightings. The silence was heavy at first, filled with expectation, like waiting for an earthquake that might still come. But slowly I started breathing again. I went back to the gym. I opened my curtains. I slept without my phone beside me. I thought of my father's words. "The right man will never keep receipts." I told myself I'd never let anyone near me again. Love wasn't worth this kind of fear. But fate, it seems, doesn't always ask permission. 3 months later, I attended a tech conference downtown representing my parents' company. It was my first big event since the chaos, and I felt a strange thrill walking into the glass hall filled with booths, engineers, and soft jazz. During a coffee break, as I stood by the espresso bar scrolling through notes, a man approached. "You're from Microcore Solutions, right?" I looked up. He was tall, with gentle eyes and a slightly awkward smile. His name tag read Matthew Anderson, co-founder of a small startup in chip design software. Yes, I said, shaking his hand. I am Isabelle. He grinned. I saw your panel this morning. You made power management sound almost poetic. I laughed. That's a first. We talked for nearly an hour about work, startups, failure, family. He didn't interrupt. He didn't steer the conversation toward himself. He listened thoughtfully, like he was trying to understand the person behind the title. Before leaving, he handed me his card. Maybe we could collaborate professionally, of course. Of course, I said, smiling. But somewhere beneath that polite tone, something fragile stirred the faint echo of trust. A week later, he invited me for coffee to discuss potential partnerships. We met at a small cafe by the harbor. What began as a business chat drifted into laughter about terrible sci-fi movies and his failed attempt to bake bread during lockdown. He was easy, grounded, kind in the quiet way, not with grand gestures, but with attention. We started meeting more often, sometimes to talk work, sometimes just because it felt easy. And for the first time in months, I realized I hadn't checked over my shoulder once. When Matthew dropped me off one evening, he paused before starting the car again. I don't know what came before me, he said gently. But I want you to know I don't rush things. I don't play games. I looked at him, caught off guard. Why are you telling me this? He smiled faintly. Because you look like someone who's still waiting for the other shoe to drop. That night, I lay in bed listening to the hum of the city outside, realizing that for the first time in a long time, the silence around me wasn't empty. It was peaceful. But peace, I knew, rarely lasts forever. Matthew kept his promise. He never rushed, never pushed, never asked more than I could give. Our relationship unfolded slowly like a sunrise you don't notice until the whole room is bathed in light. We met for lunches that turned into dinners. He remembered small things, that I took my coffee with cinnamon, that I hated slow elevators, that I always carried a notebook even when I didn't need it. He didn't ask about Brandon. He just seemed to understand there were pieces of my story that still hurt to touch. Months passed. Then one evening he invited me to dinner with his parents. I hesitated. Meeting another man's family still triggered old fears, but something in his calm voice steadied me. They're good people, he said. You'll see. He was right. His parents lived in a cozy house surrounded by lilac trees. When his mother opened the door, she hugged me like we'd met before. You must be Isabelle, she said warmly. Come in, dear. We've been waiting for you. At dinner, conversation flowed easily. His father asked thoughtful questions about my work. His mother made gentle jokes at Matthew's expense. There were no side glances, no judgments disguised as politeness, just genuine curiosity and laughter that didn't hide malice underneath. When I helped clear the table, his mother smiled and said, You know, love isn't about who serves who. It's about who stands beside. Her words lodged deep in me. I smiled back, but my chest tightened with something bittersweet. The realization that I'd once mistaken obedience for love. Life began to feel ordinary again. Wonderfully, beautifully ordinary. I worked, spent weekends with Matthew, and sometimes visited my parents at the beach house. Mom said I looked lighter. Dad said Matthew seemed solid. From him, that was high praise. Then, one afternoon, as I left my office building, I heard a voice that froze my blood. Isabelle. I turned. Brandon stood on the sidewalk, thinner than before, his hair unkempt, his suit wrinkled. There was a tremor in his hands, a strange desperation in his eyes. What are you doing here? I said, my voice steady, though my heart pounded. You're violating the restraining order. I just need to talk to you, he said, stepping closer. You don't understand my family's falling apart. You ruined everything. You owe me. Before he could finish, a familiar car door opened beside me. Matthew stepped out calm but firm. Is this him? Yes, I whispered. Brandon's eyes darted between us, his expression twisting. You replaced me already. You think this guy is better. You think he knows you. His voice cracked into a shout. You still belong to me, Isabelle. People were stopping to watch. The security guard from the front desk had already stepped outside. Matthew stood his ground. You need to leave. Now. Brandon's fists clenched. You don't know what she did. Matthew pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. For a moment I thought Brandon might attack. Then something in him broke. His shoulders slumped. He looked smaller, somehow deflated. You destroyed me, he muttered. You'll see. Everyone turns eventually. He backed away, disappearing into the crowd before the police arrived. I didn't move until Matthew touched my arm. It's over, he said softly. I nodded, but tears spilled anyway, not for him, but for the version of myself that once believed that love was something you had to earn. A year later, Matthew proposed on a quiet beach in Santa Barbara. No grand gestures, no audience, just the ocean, the wind, and a question spoken so softly it almost blended with the waves. Yes, I said without hesitation. Our wedding was small and intimate. My parents sat beside his laughter mingling across the table. His mother toasted, saying, "May you build a home that never feels like a cage." My father raised his glass and said, "And may she never forget to keep her own key." Everyone laughed, but I felt tears sting my eyes. After the ceremony, as the sun dipped low, Matthew took my hand and said, "You ever think about that house, the one your parents gave you?" I smiled faintly. Every day. It used to feel like a prison. Now it's a reminder. Of what? That no one can take what's truly yours unless you hand it over. He squeezed my hand. Through mutual acquaintances, I later heard that Brandon's life had unraveled. His company fired him after news of the restraining order spread. His family fell into debt. He tried reaching out again, emails from new addresses, numbers I didn't recognize. Some messages were bitter, others pleading. "Please help us. Just a little money. I'm sorry." I never responded. I didn't hate him anymore. I simply felt nothing. I learned that closure isn't revenge or forgiveness. It's peace, the kind that comes quietly like dawn after a long storm. Now, years later, I still live in that house my parents gave me, the same one that once became a battlefield. But it's different now, filled with warmth, laughter, and a husband who doesn't need to own me to love me. Sometimes I stand in the doorway of that master bedroom, the room Brandon's mother once claimed for herself, and smile. Because I kept it. Because I kept myself. The house that once tried to trap me became the place where I finally learned what real freedom feels like.